and welcome to healthyhouseplants.com, where we teach you all about gardening in the great indoors. If you'd like to support our show, please use our Amazon affiliate link below. Today we are doing a plant care video on this gorgeous plant. This is an Epiphyllum Anguliger. It's a striking epiphytic cactus. You can see that it has deeply lobed, succulent foliage, and it's really in a zigzaggy kind of form, so you will hear the name zigzag sometimes. Fishbone Cactus, Ric Rac plant is another common name, but the botanical name, so if you are looking for information on it, is Epiphyllum Anguliger. It is a member of the orchid cactus genus of plants. It's native to the jungle rainforests of Mexico, where it grows from tree branches. As mentioned, it's epiphytic. I do have a video on what is an epiphyte, as this plant is. I will link any videos I mentioned down below for you as well. And what an epiphyte does, like this plant, is it will use another plant as a support to grow on. It will also create roots, attach roots, some of its roots in the nooks and crannies and crevices and that sort of thing of the plant that it's growing on. Generally speaking, it will be tall trees that they will do this on, because that enables them to grow up towards the sun. But they will start at what is called the understory in the jungle, in the rainforest, which is down below. So the plant, as mentioned, grows this way, and in mature plants that you have in your Epiphyllum, epi for short, is the short term for epiphyllum. With the more mature of this fishbone cactus in your indoor garden, you will see aerial roots, and those are roots that will be coming out of the soil. So that's normal, that's totally normal, and it's actually those aerial roots, and I do have a video on aerial roots that they're common on Monstera deliciosa, for example, and other Monsteras. Those aerial roots are what attach to the tree or whatever structure that they're growing up on. That's how they grow. So if you see them in your more mature epi, this particular cactus, you will know that you're doing a really good job being Mother or Father Nature, because the plant is doing what it does naturally out in nature. So another really cool thing about this plant, and it's an easy to grow plant, and I'm going to be covering all of the care top tips for you soon here in this video as well, to how to keep it healthy and happy. This plant also, in mature plants, will create this gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous flower. And I'm putting a picture right now for you of one of those, so you can see how pretty this flower is. Generally white, pale yellow, and the really cool thing about it is it has a wonderful fragrance that will perfume your home. Now, they're short-lived flowers. They usually only last for about 24 hours or so. And the perfume, when they release the scent, it's at night. So if you have one of these plants that's starting to bud up, keep an eye on it, so you make sure that you're home for the wonderful fragrance that they do emit. And it will perfume your house for a while as well. So, okay, so how to get this gorgeous plant, which, as you can see, is very architectural as well, really makes a beautiful statement in your indoor garden. How to keep this beauty nice and healthy and happy. Starting with lighting, because lighting is so critical for all houseplants. So as mentioned, in its natural environment, this plant grows on the understory, and it receives, when it does that, and then it grows up through, growing up through the trees. But as you can imagine, and you may even know because you've been in them, jungles, rainforests, they have dappled sunlight. So this is not a bright, direct sun sort of a cactus. In that regard, it's not like your typical cactus. And as mentioned, it's an epiphyllum anyway. It's really not a cactus. It's considered an, quote, orchid cactus, but it really is an epiphyllum. as mentioned, growing up into trees and that sort of thing in its natural environment. So you want to provide this plant with indirect bright light for the most part. So when it's growing indoors, you can, however, it can get a few hours of bright indirect light, and even a little bit of direct. So it can even get, I meant to say, instead of bright indirect light, I meant to say bright direct light. If it's not too strong, it could even get a few hours of that. This plant is actually in a western exposure, but there is some a tree outside that does provide some filtering. So and this plant is doing well in that window. Southern window, another excellent place for it. Eastern window, it would get morning sun and then afternoon shade. So, and as I always say with any sort of lighting condition with your house plants, any of your house plants, if you see a plant that just is not thriving in a certain location, then you do want to try to move it to another location. And if you don't have enough light, full spectrum lighting also works really well for this plant, and you don't ever have to worry about it getting too much or too hot of sun, quote, sun, with the full spectrum lighting as well. Now, this one, as you can see, has some new growth. The new growth on it, those will be fattening up at some point. But if you don't have a whole bunch of wider growth, so to speak, the plant could be not getting enough sunlight. So in that case, move it to a place where it is getting more light. And that is about it for the light. So like I said, experiment, keep an eye on the plant, and see how it does in the different lighting locations. The one place it's really not going to do well is in a northern exposure window for sure. In dim areas, it really does need some light, as mentioned. And as mentioned, it can be at some point during the day. It doesn't have to be throughout the day. Once again, mimicking how it grows in the jungle as well. Okay, water. So in contrast to desert cacti, when you're growing the cacti indoors, that you're told basically you need to let it go bone dry, you really don't want to do that with the fishbone cactus because of where its origins are, because it is from the jungle. So in this case, generally speaking, you want to water this cactus when this epi, I should say, you should water this epi when the top 2 to 3 inches of soil has dried out. So you don't want it to be soppy wet. You don't want to overwater, because that is going to cause a lot of problems for you, a big no-no. But on the other regard, as mentioned, you don't want it to go bone dry as well. If it does go bone dry, you're fine. Just water it. It'll be okay. It's better to err on the side of not enough water with this plant than too much. But as mentioned, try to keep it from not completely drying out when possible. You also want to always water this plant with warm to tepid water, and you actually want to water all your houseplants with warm to tepid water. I have a video on why, because you don't want to, for this plant, you don't want to shock it, and you also don't want to cause root dieback. These plants are also sensitive to some chemicals that can be in water, in municipal water, also in well water. So things like fluoride, for instance. So if you start to see that the plant is having a bit of a problem and you're not really sure about your water, you might want to change to reverse osmosis or distilled water. And because these plants don't take a ton of water, that's not too much of a cost thing that you have to worry about. They do, however, tend to be thirstier in the spring and summer months when they're actively growing, so keep an eye on them more for watering during those months. In the cooler months of the year, they're going to use a lot less water. So, as mentioned, whatever you do, don't overwater them. If the leaves do start to wither a bit and look a little bit just like they're not full anymore, that is an indication that you're not giving the plant enough water. Now, if you have overwatered and it starts to do that or it starts to rot at the where the stem meets the soil, then that could be root rot. So definitely don't want to do that. Okay, now, so that's pretty much it for watering. Oh, and another thing about to be on the lookout for that would tell you you're overwatering is brown spotting on the leaves. That is an indication of a fungal pathogen and definitely too much moisture. So the next thing to consider is temperature and humidity. Because these plants are native to jungle environments, they thrive in warm, humid conditions, as mentioned. So you want to keep them in temperatures between 60 to 78 degrees. Most homes are generally in that range. Going much lower than 60, they're going to have a problem. If you go higher than 78, 80 in there, it's not the end of the world, but hopefully you'll have to keep an eye on it. So hopefully it's not all year long that you're in that sort of situation. However, it is a pretty adaptable plant, so it will adapt to the higher temperatures. It just really isn't going to do well with the lower temperatures. You want to strive for 50 to 60% humidity if you can, considering that it is from a tropical plant. However, I have found that it can go even to 40 without a lot of problems. So more humidity, great, but it's not one of those plants that's just going to dry out and wither away without that extra humidity. There are ways to give the plants extra humidity. The pebble tray, I'll link that as well. Some other ideas. Also grouping plants, because plants transpire and humidify each other. So that's another way to have some really good humidity for the plants. They will humidify each other, as mentioned. And it doesn't hurt. It never hurts to get more houseplants in my view. So as mentioned, that is it for humidity. You can get a hygrometer, test the humidity around the plant. I have a video on using hygrometer, and I'll link a good hygrometer below. They're pretty inexpensive, and they give you a really good idea of your humidity. So as mentioned, 40 to 60% humidity is great. A little bit higher, better, but as mentioned, the 40 isn't too bad either. Okay, so repotting. You can repot them every 1 to 2 years in the spring. Do it in the spring. And as mentioned, go by my 2/3 plant to 1/3 pot ratio. This plant can even go to 3/4 plant to 1/4 pot ratio. So they're not going to need repotting that often. So to keep that in mind. As mentioned, they are plants that grow with aerial roots. They grow in very little. Their roots will be in these little teeny crevices. So they're not looking for tons and tons of soil. And actually, a lot of soil, too much soil. You've got too much pot. That is the quickest way to root rot for these plants. Because even if you're not watering them much, that big thing of soil is going to take a long time to dry out. Okay, so, and as mentioned, I have mentioned too, they are going to grow slower in the winter months, so you're going to have the quicker growth in spring and summer. I would wait, say you get a growth spurt spring and summer, wait until the following early spring to repot for that season. Okay, fertilizing. So you want to feed them spring and summer. And you can use a liquid fertilizer. I'll put some links below for that. The organic fertilizer. I generally recommend using organic fertilizer. Chemical fertilizers will burn roots. That can cause root dieback, and that can cause root rot. So try to stick with an organic fertilizer. You can also, I do have a green gourmet houseplant food, which you can put into the soil, and I have a video on how to do that into an established plant. And then when you're repotting as well, so they respond really well to that fertilizer as well. I didn't mention, the type of soil in repotting. So jumping back a bit to that, you want a soil that is well draining but does have some moisture retention. So you don't want to use a cactus mix. That drains too quickly. It doesn't have enough moisture retention. As mentioned a lot of times here, it is a a plant that grows in the jungle, so you want to give it some moisture as well. So something with some organic matter in it that holds moisture, such as peat moss, but at the same time, you do want it to have really good drainage. So something with peat moss or coir, but also perlite or pumice for drainage. Could even be something with some orchid bark in it, but it would probably be more like a quarter orchid bark, and then which would be good for drainage, and then the moisture retentive. So that gives you an idea on the type of soil. And we covered fertilizer. So the fall, September, late September, stop fertilizing and resume again in March. Because that slow growth, they just don't need that fertilizer to be sitting there at the root, in the root area. The flowers. So as mentioned, the flowers are beautiful. They're one of the main attractions of these gorgeous plants. And as mentioned, the scent is just wonderful. So some ways to get them to flower, besides taking really good care of the plant and getting an older plant, which you still, number one is the first thing. But just know that they are a little bit on the difficult side to get to flower. So if you don't have one flowering, you've been growing it for a few years, it's okay. It doesn't mean you're doing, and the plant looks nice, it doesn't mean you're doing anything really bad or anything like that. They are just difficult to bloom indoors. But keep in mind that if you regularly feed them as suggested, water as you should, give them lots of good but bright indirect light, then you can a lot of times have them blooming when they get mature. If you do have an older plant, you want to try to stimulate it to flower, you can. When it gets late summer, basically actually fall, when it starts to cool down a little bit, you can expose the plant for short periods of time to 52 to 57 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's a little bit lower than that lower 60 degrees I told you about. And this would be more of a controlled thing, so put it in, say, in December and January in your home in a cooler area of the house, and then in February putting it into a warmer area. So giving it a little bit of it's kind of a little bit of a shock. You don't, like I said, you don't want to get too cold. If you do this too and you see the plant just not looking good, then just put it back into a warmer area. But sometimes that can help give the plant a jump start to flower. And you of course won't know that until the following summer, when it will then, which is generally when they will bloom. So and fertilizing, as mentioned, will also help with the blooming. Okay, so pruning. They don't really require much pruning. You can see, like, you're probably looking and think, I don't even know where I would prune anyway. So, but generally speaking, sometimes you will need to prune them a little bit. Maybe one of the vines is not looking too good, or it got damaged, or it's browning, that sort of thing. So if you want to remove the whole stem, then remove down to the base of the plant, but leaving a little nub where you finish cutting it out. And then if you want to cut off some pieces, then cut in the middle of where the notches are, and that it will harden off at that end, and sometimes it will continue to grow at that end as well. So, and as mentioned, they don't need a whole bunch of pruning. So this isn't something you're going to need to really be worried about unless there's just some sort of an aesthetic condition that you want to rectify. Okay, and the good news is when you do go ahead and prune, they are really easy to propagate. You can propagate them in soil, and after you let that end harden off, and you can also propagate them in water. Consider, however, if you propagate in water, then you have to convert those water roots to soil roots before planting, replanting. So I do have a video on how to do that as well, but that's something to keep in mind. And you would want to propagate in the spring or summer months as well. In terms of pests and diseases, this plant, I haven't had a lot of problems with pests and diseases, but some that you could have would be mealybugs. And as mentioned, you could get fungal leaf spots and root rot, but those latter two things would become from too much watering to too much water. The mealybugs, the white cottony pests, just spray them with rubbing isopropyl alcohol, 70% isopropyl alcohol, and you should be able to get rid of them fairly quickly. And as mentioned, they're not too much of a problem. So if you do see a few, spray them, make sure to spray them, kill them right away. The fungus gnats can sometimes be a problem, but generally fungus gnats come from the soil that is too moist. And they do often come when you first repot too. So one way to get, and I do have a video on organic ways to get rid of those fungus gnats, but one easy way that generally is solved with this plant is letting the first 2 to 3 inches of soil dry out. Kills the worms that creates the little baby worms that microscopic worms you can't even see, that create those fungus gnats. So, or actually that you may be able to see them if you look but anyway, they're small. So by drying out that soil, you're stopping the cycle. So if you do have a lot of fungus gnats after, say, when you bring home a new plant or after you repot, that means you are watering too much. You're keeping the soil too moist. So keep that in mind as well. So that is it for how to grow this gorgeous plant. I would definitely recommend getting your hands on one of these plants. They are just gorgeous. I did a video a while back on this one I got from Doom and Orange, and so it's a really nice specimen. So they are becoming more readily available, and they are definitely worth the investment and enjoy these beauties, and hope for a flower in the future, or flowers in the future as well. You could even have a flower party one night when it blooms, when you're waiting for it to bloom. So there you go. And you will see a new thing at the bottom there, which is a thanks icon there that is for super thanks. And that is another way that you can contribute to my channel, support my channel. It's very helpful to have support for the channel, because it does help me be able to answer questions. I love to answer viewer questions, and that is pretty time consuming for me. And also doing what I call viewer inspired videos, and basically being able to answer your questions via a video. That does take some time too, so I do appreciate any support that you can give my channel. And I appreciate you watching this video and watching the video to the end. That is great too. Thank you for stopping by today. Please leave any comments about any indoor gardening tutorials you'd like to see. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And please check the bell if you'd like to be notified when new videos are released.